صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله وسلم عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين. I don't know why some of the brothers and sisters are silent. We salute Imam al-Hussein. This is why we are here. Release your voice. All of us together, let us show our love and dedication to Sayyid al-Shuhada. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأمرهم شورى بينهم. So in your gathering with the remembrance of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, as a gift to the soul of Rasulullah, the seal of the messengers, the beloved of God and his purified and noble progeny, recite the second salawat. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of Sayyidina wa Mawlana Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. And with that, brothers and sisters, before you recite the third salawat, I am so sorry to disturb you. If there are chairs in front of you, because we've already run out of chairs, if there are chairs in front of you, please recite the third salawat and fill in the chair in front of you. Sallu ala Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. Salawat only brings more blessings to our gathering. Let us recite another 3 loud salawats ala Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Ali. Allah. In his book, The Spare, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and the son to the King of Britain, writes a story which has sent shock waves around the world. His book has become a global bestseller. for it has spoken of deep secrets from Buckingham Palace to the relationship between his mother and the Queen, to the relationship that he had with his father, his brother, and the rest of the government and the establishment. And if I were to sum up this book in one word, it would be protest. If I were to add another word, it would be awakening. This man speaks of a rigorous journey growing up in Buckingham Palace. The jealousy between his mother and the Queen, between the fight over the spotlight of King Charles and his wife, Princess Diana. The jealousy and ongoing war between the father, King Charles, and his sons, William and Harry. How he says, I grew up having an innocent relationship with my brother, just like two brothers would love each other and play with each other and complain about their difficulties to each other. He said, as we grew older, that innocence was gone. And I felt that we have become enemies. He says, there were moments in my time where I had only told William where I am and what I am doing. And those places were exposed. And my life was threatened. And I had no other option but to believe that William was the source of that information. So we grew apart. He speaks of a very dark moment in his life. The moment when he was summoned by the Queen, by his father, and his brother William. And you can tell by the title of the book, it's called Despair. He says, my whole life I felt I was the spare. I was never given importance. I did not even feel I had a belonging to this family. I constantly felt betrayed and disrespected. But he said, the straw that broke the camel's back was when I was summoned into the Buckingham Palace and they told me that you will no longer enjoy any sort of security. We will not be supplying you with security. He says, my life would be in danger. My children's life will be in danger. How can you do that? He said, it is what it is. He had to call people and say, can I stay at your house, please? I feel in danger. And he speaks of moments where his life was really in danger. But nowhere, brothers and sisters, absolutely nowhere in that book, you will find that he says, I am no longer British. I no longer identify as a British citizen. I hate my country. I want to disassociate myself with my land, with my country. Yes, he sometimes speaks of intense emotions towards the Queen and towards the establishment and towards his father and towards his brother William. But nowhere you find that he says, I no longer want to be British. I no longer identify as a British citizen. In fact, he concludes the book by saying, I will always remain a loyal soldier to this country. Now, I am here to tell you, brothers and sisters, that just like Britain belongs to Harry, America belongs to every single one of you. This country was established based on immigration from different parts of the world. Some by land, some by the sea, some by air, came to this country, and they called this country home. And they have established their homes. And they have established their businesses here. No one is more American than you are. We are all equal. This land belongs to God. And we are the creation of God. And this land belongs to the Muslim as it belongs to the Jew, as it belongs to the Christian, as it belongs to the atheist, as it belongs to the Pakistani, as it belongs to the Indian, to the Arab, to the Iranian, to the Lebanese, to whoever you may be. Once you've come to this country and you've called it home, it is your home. And I want to reference a book here tonight, brothers and sisters. And I want some of you to please take some time to read this book. This book is an extremely eye-opening narrative. African Muslims in the antebellum America. Transatlantic Stories and Spiritual Struggles by Alan Austin. He speaks of Muslims arriving to this country alongside Columbus. Muslims arrived to this country from the first day. They have been here from the first day. And he speaks, amongst the many stories, the story of a prince. This African prince, ends up as a slave in this country. It's a very unfortunate situation. Ayub bin Sulaiman Diallo. He has a very fascinating story. And he also here speaks of a man by the name of Alexander Russell Webb, who became the first Caucasian Muslim American diplomat in 1893. And I'll show you the first page. The first page is written by this prince who was enslaved here 200 years ago. 200 years ago, this statement was written by this man. He wrote, as he was a prince, he knew how to read and write. He wrote Surah Al-Hamd on a piece of paper, and he dated it to 200 years ago. So this land does belong to us, just like it belongs to everyone else. However, we face a great dilemma, brothers and sisters. Especially come November, the presidential election, our community is extremely divided, and I will speak of the divisions and the different opinions that we hear and see today. But most of the concerns are due to the ongoing genocide and the killing that is taking place in Palestine. And it is not just Muslims who have spoken against this. Muslims, like others who have an ounce of humanity, have spoken against the ongoing murder of innocent children, civilians, the destruction of schools and hospitals and houses of worship. The fact that this country should become an agent of peace around the world, to go and build bridges, to go and build hospitals, to go and build schools, not to send $14 billion as a gift to a genocidal government. That is our concern, and the concern of many, millions of Americans. And therefore, I find that our community today is divided. Some people will tell you that we're now going to vote for the Republican nominee. I'm sure you've heard of this. Anything is better than the guy today. Anything is better than the man that we see today. And we're going to vote for him. At least the economy is going to get better. And some will tell them, now you hear this obviously every day by people. Was he not the one who said Islam hates us? Was he not the one that said he created the Muslim ban? How can you vote for him? And some people are saying, no, we're going to vote for this man in office. Why? Because anything is better than the Republican nominee. And of course, it's very difficult to convince yourself, to convince a person with conscience to vote for a man who vetoed a ceasefire and aided an ongoing genocide. So we're really stuck. And some people will tell you, we're not going to vote. We're not going to vote for the reasons I have just listed. Because there isn't anybody worthy of my vote. And the fourth opinion will go as far as saying voting is prohibited. Voting is haram. You cannot vote. So where do we stand? What do we do? And let me say this very clearly and as loudly as possible. I am not here to tell you to vote or not to vote. I am not here to tell you to vote Republican or to vote Democrat. I'm not here for that. I'm here to establish another kind of discourse. And in order to do that, I'm not going to go towards the opinion of people who might be wrong at times. Because my knowledge, brothers and sisters, is limited. Any scholar's knowledge is limited. Except as we believe the knowledge of those who have been bestowed that knowledge by the Almighty God. And therefore, I'm going to take you to this book, Nahjul Balagha, by Amir al-Mu'mineen, Mawawla al-Muwahhideen, Ali ibn Abi Talib. Nahjul Balagha, brothers and sisters, has three major sections. One are the sermons of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Two are the letters of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And third section are the wisdoms of Amir al-Mu'mineen, or the short wisdoms of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Three sections. I have not heard a scholar say it's not haram if you don't read Nahjul Balagha. But I'm here to tell you, if you have not read this book cover to cover, and not once, many times over, you have done yourself a great injustice. You have done yourself a great injustice, whether you are here or whether you would listen to me some other time. If you are Muslim, read this book. If you are Shia, read this book. If you are Sunni, read this book. If you are a non-Muslim, Christian, Jew, even if you are an atheist, read this book. This book that I hold in my hand is called The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Some of you may have heard of this book. This book is referred to as the Bible of politics and diplomacy. It's written in the 1500s by an Italian man who wrote this book as advice to the Medici prince. I'm not going to spend too much time about this book. This book has sold hundreds of millions of copies. I'm not going to mention the name of rulers, kings, presidents, prime ministers, Muslim and non-Muslim, in their autobiography, I have read this, that he had, or they have copies of their book in every one of the rooms. He has one in his bedroom, he has one in his office, he has one at his work. They even have this book in their vehicles and in their aircrafts. Why? Because they believe if you follow this book, you will not make a mistake in politics. You will be a good ruler. You will be able to distinguish the right from wrong and make better decisions. Some of the things discussed in this book, the hereditary principalities, the mixed principalities, meaning diverse societies. He speaks of Darius and Alexander the Great. He also speaks of a prince's duty concerning military matters. He also speaks of, for example, the generous advisors. He also speaks of lack of cruelty and having to show mercy within the courts, and the time where you rule by fear, or you rule by love. How a prince should keep his word. How a prince should avoid being hated. How a prince should be near the masses. How a prince can acquire esteem. How a prince should avoid flattering statements. And the list goes on. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of copies of this book have been sold. Now, let us go to Nahjul Balagha to see what Amir al-Mu'mineen speaks of when it comes to a government. But before I do that, I hear a lot of people, they say, my opinion of a government and a political system is such and such. With all due respect, you ask them, where do you get your opinion from? Is it from, for example, some tafsir of the Quran that you've read? Is this an Islamic opinion? Is this the opinion of a scholar? Is this the opinion of a faqih? Is this the opinion of a mujtahid? Is this from Nahjul Balagha? Is this from traditions? Or is it based on the price of the French fries at McDonald's that you buy? Because many of us, mashallah, we have opinions, but it's all based on how much I pay for groceries at Costco or the price of a coffee at Starbucks. Have you read the books of traditions or hadiths? Have you, the people who, we have many, by the way, we have many brothers and sisters, haram police in our community. Many haram police. Voting is haram. Being involved is haram. Giving opinion is haram. Even this topic that I am discussing is haram. Everything is haram. Based on whom? Is there a marji' who has said this is haram? Is there a scholar that has said this is haram? Is there a tradition that you base your opinion on that this is haram? Creating an awakening within our community? Since when all those things are haram? And I'm about to engage, this is the scale of wisdom, or Mizanul Hikmah. Many of you have probably heard of this book. It's been translated in English. And I have a hadith that I want to share with you here in this book. In section 110, hadith 1932, which is also a quotation from Bihar al-Anwar, in section 72, 358, and section 75. Amir al-Mu'mineen says this, which is also, by the way, in this book, Nahjul Balagha. Before we discuss Amir al-Mu'mineen's opinion on a government, because today, if I want to give my opinion about a government, it should be based on something. If I want to go and I tell my non-Muslim neighbors, this is the type of government we want, this is what it would mean for a Muslim establishment, whether it's theory or practice, to establish a government. All those things, we have to base it on facts. We have to base those opinions on the legacy and the traditions of the leadership in Islam, the appointed leadership. And Make no mistake, after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, where do they go? They go to Amir al-Mu'mineen. They go to Imam Ali. They don't go anywhere else. This is his opinion about a government. And I tell brothers and sisters outside the school of Ahlul Bayt, this is the reason why we believe there are many hadiths and many ayat and many traditions that speak of the succession of Ali ibn Abi Talib to Rasulullah. Therefore, we will face Allah on the Day of Judgment and say, all those traditions, all those ayat, we believe, Ya Allah, they meant we have to follow Ali after Rasulullah. However, brothers and sisters, even if there were no hadiths and no riwayat, once I read this, once I see the eloquence and the knowledge of this man, I say I ought to follow him. I'm not going to go anywhere else. This man is worthy of leadership. He says, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, لا بد للناس من أمير بر أو فاجر. He says people need a president. People need a ruler. People need a governor. Whether that governor is good or bad, righteous or not righteous. Now obviously if he's righteous, that is good. But Amir al-Mu'mineen says even if he's not, there has to be a government. There has to be a governor. Which here, I want to pause for a moment and tell you, a lot of people think that voting means that I have now declared this man to be my imam. That this man is flawless. That this man makes no mistake. That I will not criticize this man. That I agree with his foreign policy. That I agree with his domestic policy. Voting does not mean that. It does not mean that. Voting means I am casting my opinion for an establishment that is either a declaration of God. A government is either established by the authority of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Dawood a governor. He says, Ya Dawood, you are an authority, lead. Other prophets had been given an authority to establish a government. Amir al-Mu'mineen for that period of time was able to establish the government bestowed to him by the Almighty God. It's either by God or by the people. And we are amongst the people. The right of voting gives me the ability to exercise my opinion. Let that be. Keep your opinion to yourself. Respect one another's opinion. Please do not divide our community based on things. We don't need further division. However, I want to focus on the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that we do need a government. We do need an establishment. Now, what happens in this establishment? Listen carefully. يَعْمَلُ فِي أَمْرِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. Some mu'mins will work in that government. Allahu Akbar. Mu'mins? Yes, mu'mins. Some mu'mins were given permission to work in unjust governments. One of them was in the time of Imam al-Sadiq bin al-Abbas. He was the governor of Ahwaz. His name was Najashi. I'll tell you his story very briefly. There is a man that comes to Imam al-Sadiq. He says, Yabna Rasulullah, this man, our governor, who works for the Abbasis, it seems that he is a lover of yours. It seems that he follows you. But of course, he cannot say that publicly. If this is true, Yabna Rasulullah, endorse me in a way where I don't have to pay all the taxes. Believe me, I cannot afford it. I am crippled. I cannot afford paying taxes this year. And if they come after me, I will lose my home, I will lose my family, I will lose everything that I have. Look at Imam al-Sadiq. He says, give me a piece of paper and a pen. He writes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. On the day of judgment, there is a shadow that belongs to those who help their brothers in faith. Many of you reached out to one another. If you have no power and electricity, come to my home. There's a shadow for you in the day of judgment. It's as simple as that. Opening your home for someone for one day. Allah has a shadow on the day of judgment. You will use that shadow when you're desperate for the shadow. You think it was hot last night, trying to fall asleep here in Houston? It was very difficult, but on that day it's going to be much more difficult. If you can help out a mu'min and a mu'mina in this dunya, seize the opportunity. Don't run away from the opportunity. Especially if I have electricity at home and my brother or my cousin or my nephew has no electricity, then shame on me if I do not reach out. Shame on me for not seizing the opportunity. Anyhow, so he says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, there is a shadow on the day of judgment for those who help a mu'min brother and sister. وَهَذَا أَخُوكِ, and this man, he is your brother. وَالسَّلَامُ Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq. What is that, one line? 2 lines at most? This man takes the letter and he goes to Najashi. Najashi is a governor. He has many people sitting in his court. As soon as he's done, he gives him a signal with his eyes that I have a private letter for you. So people leave. Najashi calls him. He says, what do you need? He says, I have a special letter for you. So he says, hold on. He goes into a private chamber. He opens the letter and he sees it is sealed by his imam. He kisses the letter. He puts it on top of his head. Then he comes and he kisses the hand of this man. He says, you have delivered this barakah to me, this blessing to me. I now have the handwriting of the Khalifa of Allah, the Imam of my time. What can I do for you? The Imam says that you need help. So he says to him, I have taxes, I cannot. He says, sit down. This is going to be an easy one. He calls out his personal assistant. He says, how much money do I have in my accounts? He says, I don't know. He says, go and look. Goes, looks, comes back. He says, you have nearly 100,000 golden coins. He says, give half of it to this man. He says, how many horses do I have? He says, I don't know. Let's say 50. Give half of it to this man. How many homes do I have? How many pieces of property do I have? How many servants do I have? He gave half of it to this man. Every time this man stands up and he says, please, I have had enough. All I needed was for me to pay less taxes. He says, I know, don't worry, sit down. And he keeps saying to him, Aradit, are you pleased? He says, I am more than pleased. This is enough. He says to him, Aradit, Aradit, Aradit. And he gives him more and more and more until he's about to leave. When he's about to leave, this governor says to him, listen, when you go back to the Imam, tell him what I have done because I want him to be proud of me. This is why we're here, brothers and sisters. Some people fell on the soil of Karbala defending Imam al-Hussein. And when he went to them, that's all they asked him. Ya Aba Abdullah, Aradit? Are you happy with me? Awafaytu laka ya Aba Abdullah? Did I do my part? Are you happy with me? This man, months later, goes to Imam al-Sadiq, and Imam al-Sadiq says to him, come, tell me what happened with Najashi. He says to him the story. The Imam begins to smile out of joy. By the end of it, the Imam is in tears. Tears of joy that some of his followers bring to his heart. And sometimes tears of sadness due to others. Others who are always there to look at the flaws and the shortcomings and the mistakes and expose them. But those who create harmony amongst the believers bring tears of joy to the Imam. So this man says, Yabna Rasulullah, what is this Najashi status now? Tell me what is his status with you and Allah. Listen to this. We cannot shame people just because I believe in something. I have my own political opinions, but if somebody now works for an establishment or a government or then I go out there and I shame them and I blast them. There are decent mu'mineen that have been the subject of such harassments. So he says, Yabna Rasulullah, what is this man's status? The man that he helped me. He said, he has pleased me. Then the Imam paused and he said, he has pleased my grandfather Amir al-Mu'mineen. And then he said, بل أدخل السرور في قلب جدي رسول الله. He has pleased my grandfather Rasulullah as well. And then he says he has pleased Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the seventh heaven and in his throne. If you have the ability to work for an establishment and help the cause of the mu'mineen, this could be a reward. And then he says, وَيُسْتَمْتَعُ فِيهَا الْكَافِرُ. And the kafir, who does not believe in what you believe, he also lives in peace. He doesn't live a miserable life just because he doesn't believe in what you believe. This is, of course, if the governor is Muslim. وَيُجْمَعُ بِهِ الْفَيْء. And taxes and revenues are collected. وَيُقَاتَلُ بِهِ الْعَدُوُ. And there needs to be an establishment to fight enemies if they were attacked. وَتُؤَمَّنُ بِهِ السُّبُلُ. And travelers can feel safe. وَيُؤْخَذُ بِهِ لِلضَّعِيفِ مِنَ الْقَوِيِّ. And the people with power, for example, the gangs, would not be able to loot and destroy and govern by fear. حَتَّى يُسْتَرِيحُ فِيهَا الْبَرُّ وَالْفَاجِرُ. So that a good man, a practicing man, a believer in God would be able to practice, and also the non-believers. This is the ideology of Islam when it comes to a government. Now, with that said, I want to speak of what it means to have a government, an Islamic one, or one that is praiseworthy by Islam. So that when I give my opinion, like I said, it's not based on the price of gas at the gas station, but it's based on this, the teachings of Amir al-Mu'mineen. This, brothers and sisters, declaration is the longest, most perfect declaration of politics and diplomacy in the history of humanity. Those are not my words. Those are the words of the United Nations. The declaration of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib to his governor in Egypt, Malik Ashtar al-Nakhai. It will astonish anyone if people read tens, if not hundreds of millions of this book. Imagine what would happen if we are able to spread this book around the world. Of course, I would not be able to do justice to this. No one would be able to do justice to the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I'm going to try. I'm going to try my best. But I leave you with this, brothers and sisters. Please go and read this. You will appreciate it. Teach this to your children. If your child reads this declaration, they will never have doubt that their Imam is Ali ibn Abi Talib. They will never have doubt that they must follow the teachings of Ali. That's what we need to do. That is our responsibility. And this is the responsibility of this minbar. Imam Hussein says, إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا بل خرجت لإصلاح أمة جدي رسول الله لكي آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير على سيرة جدي رسول الله وأبي Ali ibn Abi Talib. I did not embark on this journey to create chaos or division. I embarked on this journey for the sake of reform, awakening. أن الحسين مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة. Hussein is the torch of enlightenment and the ark of salvation for the community to gain awareness, gain answers, insight. And he says, my role models, my imams are my forefathers, Rasulullah and my father Amir al-Mu'mineen. Imam al-Hussein was embarking on the journey to establish this. Look at the way that Amir al-Mu'mineen begins his letter. This is in 12 sections. I don't know how many, maybe 4 or 5 I'll be able to cover tonight. This declaration is in 12 sections. And it's a document of instructions. And it is the 53rd letter of Amir al-Mu'mineen found in this book. Collected and compiled by Sharif al-Radi rahimahullah in the book of Nahj al-Balagha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. هذا ما أمر به عبد الله علي أمير المؤمنين مالك بن حارث الأشتر في عهده إليه حين ولاه مصر. Amir al-Mu'mineen, the most beautiful of his titles is that he calls himself Abdullah, the servant of God. And the servant of God, as you see, his responsibility is to serve the subjects and the creation of God, not himself, not his group, not his fraction, not his political party. There were people who would stand up to Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Friday sermon and curse him. And some people would say, Ya Ali, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, are we still going to pay those guys from Bayt al-Mal? He says, you still pay them from Bayt al-Mal. Why? Because he may disrespect me, that's fine. He may exercise his freedom. As long as he does not spread terrorism in the land, does not kill and steal, he receives his payments. He should travel freely and he should be able to speak freely. So much for this declaration of freedom was written 1,400 years ago and practiced 1,400 years ago. While we saw some of our beloved students in this country were not able to protest freely and voice their opinions freely. And you're telling me Islam is against human rights? Islam is against freedom? But it depends where you look for the Islam. What are the responsibilities of a governor or a president? He was elected or selected as the president of Egypt. Number 1, Jibayata kharajiha, collect the taxes. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, will speak about taxes and tax reliefs and who you should collect taxes from. And you take it from the rich and you give it to the poor, not vice versa. Not you don't let the billionaires and the hundreds of millionaires get away with paying taxes and then you tax the average people. He speaks about this 1,400 years ago. وَجِهَادَ عَدُوِّهَا, and protect the land against its enemies. And then he speaks of who could be the enemies. He says you have to be colorblind. You have to be indifferent whether the subjects who are being harassed are Muslims or non-Muslims, or non-Muslims under the protection of Islam. Your job is to protect all the citizens of Egypt, regardless of their faith. Again, 1,400 years ago. وَاسْتَصْلَاحِ أَهْلِهَا, and for their people to live in peace, tranquility, and وَعِمَارَةِ بِلَادِهَا. Your job is to allow them to prosper, to build their countries, to build their roads, to expand their trades. In this declaration, Amir al-Mu'mineen, in the very first part, talks about the dealings with the subjects, brothers and sisters. Pay undivided attention to this point. And you have all memorized this line when he says that the people are of 2 kinds. Ya Malik, the people that you are ruling are of 2 kinds. A, are your brothers in faith. B, are your brothers in humanity. Make sure that you train your heart and your soul to love them, to be kind to them, and to treat all of them as equal citizens. And this is what we need here. How many of you want to, right now we all get randomly selected by the TSA. We all are asked to step to the side. How much cash are you carrying? How much are you coming with? How much are you leaving with? What are you doing? Where did you go? Write the name of every person that you visited. Write down their phone number. Give me your cell phone. Let me look into your cell phone. Well, we all go through this. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali says, do not differentiate between people once you are the governor. Don't make it tough on certain groups and easy on others. Don't treat some of them as number one priority citizens and the others are second-class citizens. Don't do that. Number two, Amir al-Mu'mineen says forgive. He speaks of the forgiveness of the ruler towards the subjects. He says at any given point, you can forgive, and do not regret a time that you have forgiven others. Because there are times that a government, a ruler may forgive, but then they may regret forgiving a certain person or a group of people. Imam Ali says, don't do that. Don't judge the situation by those few individuals. Look at the broader picture. If you've forgiven individuals, then it makes it easier for criminals to quit. Because they'll see hope. If I quit, I'm going to receive forgiveness. So there's hope for me to change. Today in this country, we have the largest number of incarcerated individuals in the world. And guess who's paying for it? You guessed right. Number three. He says, do not have an overload of dictators around you, and listen to the people. The most important of your resources are not the selected few individuals with a lot of wealth and power. The government should represent the average Joe and the average man. He says, when you choose your wazirs, when you choose your counselors, or you choose your cabinet, what should you choose? Do not choose the miser, the coward, and the greedy. Why? Because with power, if somebody's greedy, guess what? You all know this. If somebody is greedy, has greed and gets to power, what do? Do they serve the people? They become blinded. All they do is they serve their own interest, their family's interest, their tribe's interest, their people's interest, their party's interest. And they ignore the people. They ignore the masses. And do not take... By the way, this also applies to us choosing friends as well, people who are around us. Also, do not choose advisors who are miser. Don't spend. Don't build a bridge. Don't build a school. Don't do this. Don't give tax cuts. Don't do that. People will not be prosperous. And also cowards. A coward have many colors. Some cowards will not even let you do anything in life. If you have a coward as an advisor, you want to start a business? Don't start a business. You want to buy a home? Don't buy a home. You want to apply to a school? Don't apply to it. Whatever you want to do, they'll tell you don't do it. You're going to fail. Sit at home. Don't do anything. And then he speaks of taxes extensively. And he says, if there is a drought or misfortune, then lesser the taxes or avoid collecting taxes. That is fine if the government has very little in the accounts for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Imam Ali says to him, think long term. Give a tax break to the people, they'll work, they'll be able to survive, and that money will come back into the government. And if there is a drought, tell all the farmers that you do not need to pay tax. And today in this government, brothers and sisters, look at taxes. American taxpayers are aiding 2 wars. One in Ukraine, one in Palestine. We're paying billions of dollars while you all have read in every single newspaper in this country about the homeless situation that we have to deal with, that has reached the Supreme Court now. You all know of the drug epidemic in this country. Instead of eradicating drugs from our schools, from our children, we're putting our noses in places that we shouldn't. Imam Ali says, when you collect the taxes, you have to spend it on the people. In fact, Imam Ali, and I'm going to speak about this on some other night as well, when I speak on khums versus zakat. Imam Ali says, do not take out a single dime from that city unless it is prosperous. Once everybody's paid, you've done everything that you need to do, then look at other places. Always meet the people. Those are the words of Imam Ali. Always have a meeting with the public. Not only when there is an election coming up. When there is an election coming up, we love the Muslim community. We want to meet with the Muslim community. We want to visit them on iftar. Once there is no elections, we don't want to have anything to do with the Muslim community. And then he speaks of nepotism. And the best of us can slip here. The best of us can slip here. And you know his story with Aqil. You know his story with his brother Aqil. When he asked him for money, and Imam Ali showed him the Dhul Faqar sword that was put in fire instead. He says, take ya Aqil. And when Aqil said, I asked you for extra money and you're giving me a Dhul Faqar that you had put it. He says, you're sending me to a fire that is created by the Almighty God. And you're whining from a fire that I created to warm myself. And in the end he says, be godly. Allow people to see God through your governance. Don't make them run away from God. And last but not least, he says, try to make as many peace treaties as possible. Islam really does mean peace. Let us make peace with our neighbors. Let us try to eliminate as many enemies as possible. This is the declaration of good governance in Islam. And if you want to have an opinion on governance, if you want to teach others what it means to have a Muslim state, send them to this book. Tonight, brothers and sisters, belongs to a man who was the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We commemorate him tonight. And he was meant to be the special envoy of Imam Hussein to take to them this good news, that if Hussein comes, this is how he's going to govern. Who was this man? We have to think of him. We have to remember him. We have to cry for him. We have to honor him. Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim. Muslims ought to be honored, brothers and sisters. The bravest of the soldiers of Imam al-Hussein and the first martyr in the camp of Imam al-Hussein. Let us send our hearts, our souls, and our minds towards Karbala, towards the camp of Imam al-Hussein. Especially when the news reached Imam al-Hussein that Muslim has become a martyr. Allahu Akbar. Brothers and sisters, especially the sisters, I want to tell you this before I read the Masa'ib of Muslim. Tonight, you all have the chance to become the Taw'a. You know Taw'a? Taw'a was a lucky woman. Because she opened the door to the messenger of Hussein. She didn't say, no, I don't want to deal with this headache. The opportunity sometimes knocks at our door once, brothers and sisters, but this is a special message to my sisters tonight. Seek inspiration from Taw'a. This woman had nothing. But today she has everything. She's remembered alongside the name of Muslim ibn Aqil and Imam al-Hussein, because she made a stance. She was brave enough to write her name amongst the companions of Hussein. And you all have the opportunity tonight to become a taw'a. To say, Ya Aba Abdullah, send that opportunity to my door and I will seize it. I will wholeheartedly become a taw'a for you. This messenger of Hussein ended up at the house of this woman, taw'a. While he was all alone and outnumbered, he prayed Salat al-Isha and there is no one else to pray behind him. So he goes, and Allah has written in the fate of this woman, taw'a, that Muslim ibn Aqil will come and knock at your door. So he came. She said to him, oh man, what do you need? He says, I am thirsty, I am hungry. So she fed him. She didn't ask him anything. She gave him water, but he didn't leave. Why? Because Muslim ibn Aqil has nowhere to go. By the way, Imam al-Hussein encouraged people to cry for Muslim. He gathered his family and he said, let us cry for Muslim. So if you have cries, cry for Muslim tonight. Then she came to him, oh man, I'm a single woman. Why are you here? Don't you have a home? Don't you have a place to go? He says, I don't have a place to go. Why? What is your name and where do you come from? He says, my name is Muslim ibn Aqil, and I was sent here by the grandson of Rasulullah, al-Imam al-Hussein. He says, Anta Muslim? Come into my home. Come into my home, I will take care of you. Let us all, everyone who wants to be a taw'a tonight, that sees that Imam al-Hussein has given them an opportunity to write their names within the servants of Imam al-Hussein. Ya Sayyidana wa Mawlana. Release your voices, brothers, sisters, wherever you may be. Inna tawajjahna wa tawassalna wastashfa'na bika ila Allah وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. All of us. يا وجيها عند الله. No. This is still unacceptable. Brothers and sisters, release your voices. Ya wajihan 'inda Allah. Brothers in the back, all the youth. Ya wajihan 'inda Allah. You all know what happened. They took Muslim ibn Aqil and they tied his hands, they tied his feet, and they dragged him in the streets of Kufa. This man is the ambassador of Hussein. And then they took him to the top of the building and they threw him from the top of the building. But before they did that, let us join our voices with Muslim, the first martyr of Hussein. He looked towards Karbala and he put his hand on his chest and he raised his voice. And he said, Assalamu alayk ya Aba Abdullah. Assalamu alayk ya ibn Rasulillah. the news reached Imam al-Hussein that Muslim has become a martyr. Imam al-Hussein called out the children of Muslim, and he began to love them, and he began to hug them, and he began to kiss them. They say to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, have we become orphans? Please tell us if we have become orphans. I am here to tell you, Ya Aba Abdullah, there was no one to love your daughter Ruqayyah. And the ruins of Sham, when they took her to the ruins of Sham and the Yahudi neighborhood, throwing trash and garbage at the family of Rasulullah. أين المنادي, brothers and sisters, وحسينا ومظلوما وشهيدا.